In this edition of Back in History, we take you back in time to the names of the countries that recognized and gave support to Biafra. For Lieutenant Colonel Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, the head of state of Biafra, these countries were the true friends of Biafra. But for Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, head of state of Nigeria, these countries were the real enemies of Nigeria. It was a war of many intrigues, and the war raged on from 1967 to 1970. The first country that gave recognition to Biafra was Tanzania. This was done on the 13th day of April 1968. At that time, Julius Nyerere was the president of Tanzania. This was Biafra's first recognition in 11 months since the commencement of hostilities, and the recognition meant so much to Ojukwu and to Biafra as a whole. So much of it was said on Radio Biafra and published in several newspapers across the continent. The statement of recognition was made public on behalf of the government of Tanzania by C.M. Gonja, then Tanzania's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. This recognition was followed by public statements made by President Julius Nyerere himself in his justification of the decision of his government to formally recognize Biafra as an independent state. He stated amongst others as follows, quote, "What right have we, in the name of unity, to refuse to recognize the fact of Biafra? For years, the people of that state struggled to maintain unity with the other people in the Federation of Nigeria. Even after the pogroms of 1966, they tried to work out a new form of unity which would guarantee their safety. They have demonstrated by 10 months of bitter fighting that they have decided upon a new political organization and are willing to defend it. Tanzania has recognized the state of Israel and will continue to do so because its belief is that every person must have some place in the world where they are not liable to be rejected by their fellow citizens. But the Biafrans have now suffered the same kind of rejection within their states, the same thing that the Jews of Germany experienced. Fortunately, they already had a homeland. They have retreated to it for their own protection, and for the same reasons, after all other efforts had failed, they have declared it to be an independent state. We therefore recognize the state of Biafra as an independent sovereign entity and as a member of the Committee of Nations. Only by this act of recognition can we remain true to our conviction that the purpose of society and of all political organization is the service of man." End of quote. You can find this quote in the document titled Government of the United Republic of Tanzania, Case for Recognition of Biafra, New York, United Republic of Tanzania Mission to the United Nations, April 13, 1968. Ojukwu and the leaders of Biafra were excited about this endorsement from no less a person but Dr. Julius Nyerere, whose voice had become well known in domestic and international discussions on issues of governance in general and on the destiny of the African continent. Dr. Julius Nyerere received applause from Biafrans in Biafra and those in the diaspora. But the federal government of Nigeria was disappointed in Dr. Julius Nyerere and Tanzania for the endorsement of Biafra. Nigeria's military head of state, Yakubu Gowon, described the endorsement as ill-advised and reckless, and as his show of resentment, he immediately recalled Nigeria's ambassador to Tanzania and severed diplomatic ties with Tanzania. The war went on between Nigeria and Biafra, and for many months after the endorsement of Biafra by Tanzania, the war did not end, but Tanzania did not withdraw their support and endorsement of Biafra. The second country that gave recognition to Biafra was Gabon. This was announced on the 8th day of May 1968. In his public declaration of support for the independent state of Biafra, President Omar Bongo stated as follows at a press conference, quote, "We, the people of Gabon, hereby recognize Biafra. Biafra still exists. For those who don't believe, saying that Biafra is no more, for us, Biafra still exists as long as the negotiation is still ongoing. because nothing proved to us that Biafra is finished. Why do we Gabonese recognize Biafra? Firstly, it is purely the goals of humanity. Secondly, because we know that the Nigerian Federation is a fraud and it reflects no basis. I will not tell you the history of Biafra here, but I will if necessary. But you just have to look back to 1900, to what Nigeria was, before coming back to 1906 to understand it. We Gabonese know that kind of federation. As Gabonese, we once belonged to a federation known as Federation of Old AF. We know that we are a Cinderella syndrome of this federation. For this, we know that the situation that is prevalent in Biafra is similar to the one we know, with the only difference of the genocide of Biafra, which they don't want to recognize and accept as it is. So for this experience, we the Gabonese hereby recognize Biafra. End of quote. The Nigerian government was displeased with President Omar Bongo, especially his choice of words, particularly his description of Nigeria as fraud. Nigeria took serious exception to it. Gabon went on to offer material support to the Biafran cause. When hunger became a serious killer in Biafra, Gabon allowed its airport in Libreville to serve as takeoff and landing point for aircraft that carried relief materials to Biafra. At that time, there was a blockade on the Nigerian airspace and planes were not allowed to fly relief materials across the Nigerian airspace to Biafra. Gabon is not far from the bite of Biafra. Gabon is rich in oil and other mineral resources. It is possible that Gabon also gave financial support to Biafra. Up to the end of the war in January 1970, Gabon did not withdraw its support for Biafra. The third country that publicly declared support for Biafra was Ivory Coast, which was known at the time as Côte d'Ivoire. The recognition was made on the 14th day of May 1968. The recognition was made by the then president of the country, President Houphouët-Boigny. Ojukwu was very excited about this recognition. President Houphouët-Boigny's recognition of Biafra was propelled by his sympathy for the Biafran cause and also propelled by his fears about Soviet influence in Africa through their support for Nigeria during the war. Ivory Coast stood by Biafra throughout the war and became very helpful to Ojukwu and his people when the war was brought to an end. In Ojukwu's last flight from Biafra through Uli Airport in January 1970, Ojukwu's destination was Ivory Coast. He obviously would have discussed with President Houphouët-Boigny and obtained his permission to move to Ivory Coast with his family and close associates. Ojukwu left Biafra at night, and on arrival in Ivory Coast, he became the guest of the president. Ojukwu remained in Ivory Coast for 13 years before he was eventually allowed by the Nigerian government to return to Nigeria following a presidential pardon. Ivory Coast was indeed in the good books of Biafra, while Nigeria, on the other hand, was not happy with them for their support for the Biafran cause. Nigeria accused them of being responsible for the innocent souls that died in the war. The fourth country that declared open support for Biafra was the Republic of Zambia. This was done on the 20th day of May 1968. At that time, Kenneth Kaunda was the president of the country. Kenneth was a well-respected voice in Africa, and at the time of his recognition of Biafra, Zambia was a key member of the Organization of African Unity. Ojukwu was happy, but Gowon was extremely disappointed in Zambia. On 20th May 1968, Nigeria's roving ambassador at the time, Chief H.O. Davis, and his team flew into Lusaka, capital of Zambia, with a personal message for President Kaunda from the head of state of Nigeria. At the time of their departure to Lusaka, they did not hear of Zambia's support for Biafra. On arrival, they heard the news of the support. Chief Davis then returned to Nigeria in the same aircraft that conveyed them barely 1 hour after touchdown. Davis and his team did not bother at this point to meet with President Kaunda and deliver the message of the President of Nigeria, President Kaunda and his country having declared full support and given recognition already to Biafra. A few days after that, Nigeria's ambassador to Zambia, together with the staff of the embassy, were recalled from Zambia and redeployed. The Republic of Haiti also gave its open support and recognition to Biafra. This was the first recognition for Biafra from outside Africa. Haiti is itself a country of several revolutionary figures, and the revolution by Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu resonated easily with Haiti, hence their open recognition for Biafra. This recognition meant a whole lot to Ojukwu and the people of Biafra. It was widely reported in the papers and radio stations across the world. A number of other countries also gave their support to Biafra, but did so quietly without any public declaration. Most of such countries did not want to offend Nigeria. Some gave support to Nigeria and Biafra at the same time and in equal proportion. Some of them had economic ties and interests with Nigeria and therefore had to tread cautiously. They supplied weapons and further military assistance to Biafra, but did so quietly. When hunger became a serious problem in Biafra, these countries supplied food to Biafra. If Biafra had succeeded, the oil wells in Nigeria today would have been in Biafra, and these countries were more or less driven by the anticipated economic gains they would have from Biafra. They worked behind the scenes, but Biafra benefited one way or the other from them. What Biafra did not have was recognition from any of the superpowers. America, United Kingdom, Russia, China, France, and other big countries of the world did not make any open declaration of support for Biafra. This was a serious minus for the Biafran struggle. Analysts have said that if Biafra had gotten the public support of any of the superpowers, weapons, logistics, and training would have been provided, and the war would have taken a different dimension altogether. One of the major challenges of Biafra was the absence of weapons to prosecute the war. The federal side was better equipped with more competent military men and women to sustain the war. At some point, Biafra exhausted its conventional weapons and had to resort to the use of locally made weapons such as the local bomb called Obunigwe. These locally made weapons were nonetheless destructive, but their impacts were momentary and could hardly withstand the firepower of modern warfare. On 9th January 1970, the Biafran dream took a nosedive when the leader of Biafra, Lieutenant Colonel Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, left the Republic of Biafra in the last flight from Biafra, which took off from Oli Airport. He arrived in Côte d'Ivoire, where he took asylum and remained there for 13 years. 2 days after his departure from Biafra, Biafra was surrendered to Nigeria by Major General Philip Effiong, Ojukwu second in command. The decision to surrender Biafra to Nigeria was not a unilateral decision taken by Philip Effiong alone, but a decision reached upon consultation with the remaining leadership of Biafra. The story of Nigeria-Biafra war is a story defined by several events. It remains an unforgettable period in the history of the people of the former eastern region of Nigeria and of Nigeria as a whole. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to this channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I remain your friend and host Ekemini Udim, wishing you the best of time as we continue to journey together in this mission to discover and document in contemporary digital forms the vast historical narratives of the continent of Africa.